It's a loaded crop of wide receivers for the 2024 NFL Draft, so we're offering our final rankings today on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast.
You are Locked On NFL Scouting with the Draft Dudes, your daily podcast for NFL and college football scouting. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's better than this?
Nothing.
It's guys being dudes here on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast. We're the Draft Dudes. I'm Joe Marino from Locked On Bills. He's Kyle Crabbs from Locked On Dolphins. And we are your NFL experts here with you daily to talk team building across the league on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast with the Draft Dudes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Want to issue a big thank you, shout out, and welcome to our everydayers. Those of you who make Locked On NFL Scouting your first listen every single day, we appreciate y'all being here very, very much. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase.
Joe, happy Tuesday to you. Happy.
Is it Tuesday?
It is Tuesday.
Thank you for the reminder.
You'll settle in about 6 months. You'll figure
Oh,
out.
good. 6 months. Yeah. All right.
You got a little time.
Good. I hope is that get me ready. Am I going to be good for week 1 of the season, or are we going to be a zombie?
You might start on the PUP.
Probably so. There's new rules though. There's new rules on this, right? I could start the season on IR and my season's not over, right? You see these new rules?
Yes,
Yeah,
I think there's up to 2. You could do that for 2 players and designate them from the jump to skip guys going out to the parking lot to get cut and then come back in and sign at 401.
Yeah, I'm a team player. If you want to send me to the parking lot and give me a couple extra bucks for the signing bonus for my trouble, I'll do that for the team, But I could start the year on the injured reserve. I don't, Kyle, we got to get out of this rabbit hole. I don't have the mental acuity to stick with the bit.
You just use the word acuity. I mean, you feel like you're doing pretty good.
Yeah, blind squirrels and nuts, man. Sometimes it comes together.
And then a successful analogy. So good on you. But let's get into the wide receiver class that kind of hopefully get you into rhythm here today on the show.
Yeah, I saw you go through this, though, about 6 months ago, and I can tell you're a little out of your game. I'm sure maybe that's the case on the other side of things right now.
Well, also, if it makes you feel any better, both mine were up by 5 o'clock this morning. So we were out of sync here in this household as well. But we're going through our wide receiver rankings. You and I each respectively did 24 wide receivers. And in years past, we've probably done almost twice that many wide receivers, right? When it was just draft specific, right? And when we were draft year round and responsible for regions and all that kind of stuff. But a lot of our winter process was dedicated to doing the same kind of scouting for NFL free agents. And I think that's kind of where our process has changed is we spend January, February doing free agents in the NFL for 10 weeks and putting rankings together in that regard, and then flipping the switch come the NFL Combine and doing the same thing for the draft for another 10 weeks. So that has us in a position where we have 24. I've done 24 and have no grades lower than a 5th round grade. So
that's the same for me.
It's a really, really good group of wide receivers, which is why we're starting with them. But also we are 2 teams that are in need of wide receivers. So we kind of invested our time here early in this group before saying, I got all these other positions to do. I can't keep going and figure out where the cutoff is for what the draftable wide receivers are in this year's class.
Well, and as an important note on the fact that we both did 24 receivers and none lower than a 5th round grade, we tried to pick the ones that are supposed to be the best, right? That was the intent of that. So not that there's not 6th, 7th round grades out there. We just tried to prioritize the best players in the draft.
Are you interested to find out how many overlap we have? How many 5s do you have?
2.
2? What are their names?
Cornelius Johnson and Johnny Wilson.
Okay. So I technically did 25 if you have Johnny Wilson. I came away with tight end vibes there. And I know there's some polarizing opinions on what direction to go with him.
Johnny Wilson is very firmly in the bucket of I'll let somebody else figure out if that's going to work out in the NFL.
Right.
So there's my big analysis on him. He's big. He's athletic. There's concerns like
Catch the ball
separation
skills,
ability,
but
sort of. Yeah.
Well, the drops are frustrating, but like the
Yeah.
catch radius shows up for him
Yeah.
big time.
Yeah. Discount Devin Funchess. I mean, you excited about that? I'm
Mm.
really not.
All right.
But
Well, let's go to the top.
Yeah.
We'll come back to day 3 towards the end of the show. Top 10 grades. Did you do the same distribution that we've done historically the past 5-6 years we've been doing this together? Top 10s, first round, late 1, early 2s.
Yep.
Cool. Top 10 grades?
One of them.
I got 2. Marvin Harrison Jr.
What's fun though is that doesn't mean I don't like other receivers. I'm very stingy about my top 10 grades. Somebody asked me the other day if I were to take the last 3 years of wide receiver prospects, so this year and the previous 2.
Mm-hmm.
We do a numerical scoring, so you can look and see year over year, how different classes compare. These 3 guys for me are the 3 highest wide receivers over the last 3 years.
So you like the top 3 versus anyone from the last 2 years' classes?
That's right.
Okay.
I think this is a different animal in terms of the top
Probably,
3.
right? Yeah. Now I have Marvin Harrison Jr. and then I have Malik Nabers, who snuck in by a couple fractions of a point to get a top 10 qualifying grade for me. And then one of my highest non-top 10 grades that I gave was to Odunze. So he's
same order.
Firmly in that bucket. Now we've exhausted that conversation. We did a deep dive on those guys.
Yep.
Right. We did that whole show probably 2 weeks ago. So if you're interested in the deep dive, you can go kind of hear where we sort out those 3 respective players. I'd be curious from you, Joe, because this is where things get really nuts, is after the top 3, everybody's kind of got a different flavor. Everybody's preference kind of shows up here. Were there any other players that were in the late 1, early 2 bucket for you, or in the first round bucket? I will tell you there's no more 1s, but I had 2 in the late 1, early 2.
Yeah, I have 2 late 1, early 2s. Their names are Xavier Leggete from South Carolina, Brian Thomas Jr. out of LSU.
Okay. So we overlap on Leggete. I also have another late 1, early 2, and it's Ricky Pearsall instead of Brian Thomas. So maybe that's where we could spend the last few minutes here on segment 1, where we talk first round grades, is the guys that we had late 1s on.
Yeah.
And Brian Thomas and Ricky Pearsall.
Well, let's just hype up the guys that we have, right? I don't want to sit here and I don't want to talk crap about a prospect because I like Pearsall. He's just not as high for me. With Brian Thomas Jr., wide receiver out of LSU, it's the big playability down the field. And he has that type of speed, like pull away speed that can get behind the secondary, and he's got good ball tracking skills. I absolutely acknowledge the need for him to become a more complete wide receiver, very limited route tree at LSU. And even in the instances where he was asked to, cross face, work the short intermediate areas, I didn't love what I saw. And I didn't love what I saw in some of those contested, I wouldn't say contested, more congested areas where he had to catch the football in a little bit of traffic. I think
Missouri played bigger in those instances.
Yeah. I thought Missouri and Alabama, if you're looking for 2 games to kind of see what I'm talking about, those games stand out to me. But he's young. He's got an unbelievable physical profile. He can win down the field. I am giving him the benefit of the doubt that those things can come along. But this is me betting on traits, right? I always kind of find myself in that space where I'm willing to do that. And I'm giving Brian Thomas the courtesy here that he will develop and be a player that's worth kind of a pick in that 25 to 40 range.
So I agree with it exactly how you saw Brian Thomas. And if you told me long-term that Brian Thomas ended up being the 4th best wide receiver out of the class, I'd see the pathway, right? Because it's all in player development and growth as a player. Also, his work versus man versus work versus zone, I thought was a prominent kind of disconnect. I think he's much better against man coverage. I know against zone coverage, I believe he had the second lowest yards per route run against zone coverage of like the top 20 wide receivers in this year's class. So it's a player who won a lot from the slot, ran the downfield routes, the fades, the goes, those deep developing routes. And then hitches on the outside. And that really felt like it was where he was able to have so much of his success, where I got really taken by Pearsall in the variety of ways in which he wins, where he won down the field, he won in the middle of the field, he won in the intermediate areas of the field, he won from the slot, he won from the outside. I think he runs an exponentially more diverse route tree than what Brian Thomas does right now. And he's not as big, he's not as fast, but he's plenty explosive. He's got a 42-inch vertical, right? So like you saw the catch he had against University of Charlotte on the seam pass that was probably thrown 15 yards over his head that he still somehow managed to go up and get. Like those plays, I think still exist. So I think Pearsall is just this super well-rounded player that brings so much to the table that I think he's going to get inserted into an offense as long as he's not asked to be the guy. And he's going to have a lot of short-term success, where I think the Brian Thomas game is a little bit more of a long-term game.
I got a mid-2 on Ricky Pearsall, and that's a nice little segue because we're going to talk about day 2 players here on the other side of it, so be sure to stick with us. Have you ever considered what you would do if you had an extra hour in your day? Would you exercise, read, spend time with a loved one, maybe catch up on some sleep? That's probably what I would do. A lot of us spend our lives wishing we had more time. The question is, time for what? If time was unlimited, how would you use it? The best way to squeeze that special thing into your schedule is to know what's important to you and make it a priority. Therapy can help you find out what matters most to you so you can do more of it. It's helpful for learning positive coping skills and how to set boundaries, and empowers you to be the best version of yourself. It's not just for people who've experienced major trauma. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. All you do is fill out a brief questionnaire. That'll get you matched with a licensed therapist. You can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon.
Joe, you're doing great.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
It's just cooking like you never left. I have 11 second and third round grades at wide receiver out of a total of 24 wide receivers that I've graded.
Let me give you that answer for myself, Kyle Crabbs. Yeah, I pulled away from the sheet. That would be really helpful for knowing that.
You would think that would be up, so I take back everything I said. You were doing great, and you left your sheet behind for the wide receiver list for what we're discussing. So I'm judging you, but I also understand it.
I have 12.
12
days.
Are you including your late 1, early 2s in that, or no?
No, I'm not.
Okay, so am I. So we're on the same boat then. Do you want to go the 2s? Just give the 2s who you have and in what order?
Yeah,
and I'll do the same for me, and then we'll go to 3s after that.
So we're now at my wide receiver 6 because I have it Harrison Nabers, Odunze, Leggete, Brian Thomas Jr. At number 6, AD Mitchell out of Texas. Okay. Number 7, Lad McConkey, Georgia. 8, Ricky Pearsall, Florida. 9, Xavier Worthy, Texas. 10, Troy Franklin, Oregon. 10, Jalen Polk, Washington. 12, Jermaine Burton, Alabama. 13, Roman Wilson, Michigan. 14, Javon Baker, UCF. I'm fascinated to hear what you have to say about him. 15, Malik Washington, Virginia. 16, Malachi Corley, Western Kentucky. And my last one, Keon Coleman, Florida State.
Which of those were 2s and which of those were 3s? Where was the cutoff?
The cutoff is Jalen Polk. So Mitchell, McConkey, Pearsall, Worthy, Franklin. Polk.
Are 2s.
2s, yeah.
Okay. My 2s are Lad McConkey. So my wide receiver 6, it's Harrison Nabers, Odunze, Pearsall, Leggete. Wide receiver 6 is Lad McConkey. He's the first of my second round grades. Roman Wilson from Michigan is wide receiver 7. Xavier Worthy from Texas is wide receiver 8. Jermaine Burton from Alabama. There's an asterisk on there. Sounds like there's some questions, maturity questions off the field for him, but just based off the film, he's a 2 for me. That is what, wide receiver 9. Then I have Brian Thomas at wide receiver 10 with a second round grade, and AD Mitchell is wide receiver 11 with a second round grade.
I would love to spend some time in this block talking about AD Mitchell. Well, and you didn't have Javon Baker yet, so
you're gonna wait till the next segment to hear me talk about.
All right. Well, that's a nice tease. I I'd love to talk about AD Mitchell.
Great.
Texas. Fascinating player. Like, I think the range of outcomes are broad with AD Mitchell. Certainly height, weight, speed guy. Some really good ball skills. Right. And for a guy that's a bigger receiver, I do think there's a lot of fluidity.
Just the body control at the catch point.
Yes.
Really
it's all good. It's all really good. But I do have questions here. Like, that TCU game, I can't get out of my head where he like just legitimately targeted and not finishing routes.
Yeah.
Which I got you kind of put together enough information and you can understand why there's a level of concern. So I think the ceiling's really high. I think it's a little bit of buyer beware. Maybe in the real world, I would let somebody else figure him out. But I also don't want to miss out on the ceiling. So to me, he's one of the more complicated evals of any prospect at any position for me.
I would be inclined to agree, where if you're going to bet super high on him, I get it, right? In the same way that I get it with Brian Thomas, and I'm a little bit lower on Brian Thomas than you are in the consensus, and I understand that. And AD Mitchell, I'm kind of in the same boat. I think some of the issues for me, I thought just game to game, there was such erratic inconsistencies with how he looked and how engaged he was at times. He got almost no run in the slot, and I understand that for like what Texas had in their offense last year. Like, that's a limiting factor when you had Jatavian Sanders as a move piece and Xavier Worthy, who was the guy who moved around a little bit more in the motions and the pre-snap and all that stuff. Like, I get it. Yards after the catch is not a strength. Right. So you're getting into creating explosive plays with the ball in your hands. I don't think that's an element to his game at all. I thought there was a general disinterest in taking contact and showing toughness after the catch with the ball in his hands. And I didn't think in contested situations, it's his body control at the catch point shined with inaccurate throws, which Quinn threw quite a few of.
Stinks. He stinks.
Yeah, well, that's a conversation for like May or June. We'll have that.
Do we have to? I mean, we're going to talk about the good quarterback prospects.
We're going to talk about who the top 2025 quarterback prospects are, and Quinn Ewers is not even remotely close in that conversation.
Miss me completely.
Texas would have won the Natty if they had halfway decent quarterback.
Oh God, any other quarterback besides Quinn Ewers and Graham Mertz, they had a real chance,
brother. I mean, they had maulers in the run game up front. They had an all-star cast of skill players. They had an unstoppable combo on defense with their two interior defensive linemen. Some young guys on the edge. Jalen Ford, a linebacker. Like, they had a loaded team.
Arch Manning couldn't play. That other dude, that big dude Malik Murphy, that's his name. Man, I was disappointed to see that he can't play either.
Because he got a start this year, right?
Oh yeah, it was rough, man.
So anyway, AD Mitchell.
Yeah.
So I think for me, it's okay. I think you're a perimeter exclusive player who at times runs hot and cold, getting the ball into your hands and allowing you to create plays is something that I need to see grow in your game. And then there was kind of the stark contrast of where Brian Thomas was kind of underwhelming to me against zone coverage. I know AD Mitchell's performance against man coverage, there were some holes in his resume as far as advanced production metrics for him. And I thought that showed up at times with how he ran hot and cold. So all of that to say, I just think there's too many gaps, but I see the pathway for success for AD Mitchell.
Couple of yak guys here in Malik Washington and Malachi Corley. I mean, they're all they did was create after the catch. So like, I know much.
Here's the difference. I think Malik Washington can actually run routes.
Well, I'd agree. Yeah,
Corley's route running is a blank slate.
Right. He's kind of has that Amari Rodgers profile to me a little bit.
Not a good name to invoke.
Yeah,
Amari Rodgers got me too. He got me good.
Sometimes we correct ourselves, right?
Right. Well, so I had AD Mitchell was the cutoff of my twos. You gave your ones or your twos and threes. My threes were Malachi Corley, and Malik Washington. I had them back to back. And then I had Jalen McMillan from Washington, Keon Coleman from Florida State, and Jalen Polk from Washington were my threes.
I feel like I'm most interested in some of the names that I haven't heard yet on your list, which I'm guessing are coming up.
Troy Franklin and Javon Baker are the two big.
Yeah, those are the two
players that we have.
Yeah. Okay, so we got to talk about that and players that we do like on day 3 on the other side of it. So be sure to stick with us. Folks, you shouldn't have to worry when you're looking to buy tickets for your next big event. Well, you don't have to, because Game Time is here for you, and it's the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. My favorite thing about Game Time is that they specialize in killer deals on last-minute tickets. And I got 2 kids now, man. I don't know if I'm going to be available on July 11th to go to a concert. So I don't want to buy those tickets today, but if I could, I'd love to have the opportunity to get them last minute. Game Time provides that for you and so much more. The app is super easy to use. They give you all-in prices, a view from your seat, and a best price guarantee. They have flash deals, and when you buy a ticket, it goes straight to your phone, so you don't have to dig through emails. So snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL. That'll get you $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL. That's LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
All right, so we're into day 3, or at least for my guys. We have some of your lingering day 2 guys. Do you want to get into Javon Baker and Troy Franklin first, since we've invoked those names? I have fours on both of those players.
Why don't you give us your day 3 list, and then I'd specifically love to hear your thoughts on them.
All right, so my 4th round grades are Tez Walker, North Carolina, Brendan Rice, USC, Troy Franklin, Oregon, Javon Baker, UCF. Then my 5s are Cornelius Johnson, Michigan, Jacob Cowing, Arizona, Jamari Thrash, Louisville, and Jordan Whittington, Texas. And then I also have Johnny Wilson in my tight end bucket.
Okay. Go ahead. Troy Franklin, Javon Baker, very different players. Guys that I think, I don't know, I think probably for Baker, I'm used to seeing a lot of variance with him, right? I've seen some early day 3 grades where you have him. I've seen some day 2 stuff. He's kind of like one of the guys that I just really like in this class. So maybe start
there. Imagine my heartbreak thinking I had like this really good comp for him, just to find out it's the number 1 comp on his mock draftable chart.
Oh, who is it?
Romeo Doubs. So a little bit of a vertical down the field player, little bit of a bigger frame for that style of play, but some frustrating drops on tape. Doesn't have the same kind of breakaway speed that I think you would probably hope that he had for being a vertical down the field type of player. But he also doesn't have like high end length or high end catch radius. So that for me, for Javon Baker, it's like, if you want to have somebody who can be physical, can win down the field, but isn't like a burner that's going to threaten you consistently with stacking you in one-on-one outside, and you have to be willing to live with the drops there. I think there were some frustrating drops on tape for Javon Baker, and that was one of the things that really hurt Troy Franklin for me too, was the drops. Then if you want to buy on the 3rd round, I think that's a perfectly fine place to be. Just for me personally, he came in just below that threshold in the 4th round. But I think there's a lot of parallels to Romeo Doubs in his game.
I think that's a good name to invoke. I have him as a 3, so like we're not like super different here.
Right.
I really liked his release package. And I thought that put him in good positions to be able to create some leverage advantages early on. And then I thought there was just more to unlock with this game. I thought he did create a reasonable amount of separation. And I did like his ability to win down the field. I recognize that you like ideally, I have literally in my notes, vertical receiver that features only modest speed. Will he be able to pull away from good NFL man corners, right? Like that's a legitimate question.
Yeah.
I just feel like there's more for him to do than just win down the field, which was kind of what he was asked to do. He had a 14.7 average depth of target for his career at UCF. So I'm kind of curious what more to his game is out there to unlock. So,
well, and I think you raised a good point about the release package, because that's how, as a player who does run in the mid 4.5s, you do win down the field, as you win early, right? So I think that's a great point. The question is, how much more, what else can you add to your bag as far as areas of the field that are kind of your bread and butters? Are you going to be a slant guy and a go guy? And if that's what you are, okay. And you can break, you can win digs off of that and win in the intermediate area, but just how diverse of a tree can you build? And that's the question that I have. And when you don't have the elite athletic profile to go with that, and then you have some drops on top of it, it's just like, I like your game, but I could take you or leave you, or I don't feel like finding an alternative type of player to play that kind of role would be super difficult to find.
Well, and I think an important thing to invoke with this entire conversation is, like, outside of the top three guys, they're not complete players, right? So you have to find out what they can do. I had a conversation with Chris Trapasso yesterday, and he made a good point. He said we could sit down and watch tape on players all day long, and I think we would come away thinking that they're good and bad at the same things. It's how you value those things and how you project certain things moving forward. That's where the difference in rankings is going to come. And so I think, and that's a good thing,
especially in a class like this where there's I have 16 guys with 2s, 3s, and 4s. And in reality, the margins for that are fairly slim.
Super small. You grade a guy 1 point better in one specific trait,
move them up 3 spots in the rankings and potentially into a different bucket for 2.
Right. That's why I'm in love with horizontal boards. You know, that's become my thing. And I know you kind of got there before I did, but I'm there. I'm fully there.
Now you just got to start putting your team's own players on the board.
We'll see. Maybe next year.
That'll be the
one
big
thing at a time, Kyle.
It's super fun. I love my board. And then the other one's Troy Franklin.
Yeah, just some thoughts there.
Oh, what a weird athletic profile to run a 4.41, but then have a 19th percentile 10-yard split, right?
He's sick, man.
Wins down the field. There's no question this is another vertical receiver. I think he's your stereotypical Z. I think this is a little bit more Will Fuller type of profile as far as where he wins as compared to a Romeo Doubs, which was the conversation for Javon Baker. Drops are another thing. He is a career 10% drop rate, and some of them were bad.
Yeah.
It's like, man. But then also as a guy who is a little thin-framed, I do get a little worried about your ability to play through contact and not get pushed off your spot. And there were a lot of reps where I kind of saw him get either knocked off his spot or lose his footing because of contact in space. So then you have that, and you know, he has some pretty good measures for agility. He ran a 6.9. He ran a sub 7 second. Wow, who's the one with the newborn? Sub 7 second 3-cone drill. So that's good agility. But he has less than 200 career slot snaps in 3 seasons. And I don't really like him as a middle of the field type of target just because of his frame and his stature. So for me, it's like, okay, I think you're a vertical plane receiver that's going to break your heart a couple times with some bad drops.
Right.
But there's no question you can fly down the field and win vertically. And I think he's one of the better ball trackers down the field in the vertical elements in this year's class. So I just think he's a very narrow player in where he brings wins right now, but that doesn't mean that's not somebody that can build off of that. I just have questions about how he builds off of it when you consider 176 pounds, not playing in the slot, not really comfortable with him playing with contact.
I think one of the things that helped me buy in a little bit with Troy Franklin, because I recognize the concerns, the volume that he had at Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, this is a guy that 81 catches, 17 yards a catch, 12.3 average depth of target in an offense where 30% of throws are behind the line of scrimmage.
Yeah. And
I think, like, you do see some drops, but also you do see him extend and pluck and really snare that ball away from his frame. I like the youth here. He's 21. He's going to be 21 for his entire rookie season. And as we work through the COVID year, man, these prospects are older, man. I can't tell you how many 23s, 24-year-old guys I'm watching. It's just part of the deal, man, right now, at least.
So those were the guys that you came in higher on and where I fell. on them and why they didn't make my day 2 bucket for wide receivers.
Have a day 3 guy you want to like pound the table for here that just moves the needle for you?
And so I think we've talked about 2 guys that are vertical plane receivers right now. I take Tez Walker over both of them from UNC. He was my highest graded day 3 player. He's that long limbed, leggy guy where maybe he's got a little bit of build up speed, but he really impressed me with his stuff down the field and staying engaged on scramble drills and finding space and finding holes. And Drake, one of Drake May's better qualities was the outside of structure stuff. And I thought he really showed good instincts in that regard. And he's a bigger frame than the other 2 guys. So I think that's a nice extra niche in his hat for another guy that ran in the 4.3s. But I would probably go with Jacob Cowing from Arizona as my pound the table guy. I think he runs great routes. He's just tiny. He's like 5'9", 170, something like that. But he ran high 4.3s, 4.4, and he can win from the slot. He's somebody who showcased really good short area agility on hard angled routes and routes that are whip routes and things that break hard against your initial momentum to create separation. So I think he's a slot exclusive player, but I do think there's a level of explosiveness to his game that really is maybe a step down from Malik Washington from Virginia for a player who I think can do a lot of the same things, but is gonna, if he's not a top target in your offense, I think he can do a lot of good things as a complementary player for your offense.
If I shout out a day 3 guy, maybe Jamari Thrash out of Louisville. There's a lot he could do, right? Like, certainly a linear player in some degrees, but I think he's got separation quickness. Certainly he's got, he's not immune to the drops. That's definitely a thing with him, but I like the transition from, was it Georgia State to Louisville? I think he's got a reasonable shot to give you a meaningful early day 3 pick. Also, Luke McCaffrey from Rice. I'm interested, man. I'm interested.
I didn't catch him, so I'm glad you did.
Yeah, I mean, maybe a slot only, but there's you could just tell, he's got those bloodlines. You can just kind of sense the way that he plays. He converted from quarterback 2 years ago and winds up being he led the conference in receiving yards this past year, his second season ever playing receiver. I just feel like maybe there's just upward momentum. That's what I'm looking for. I don't want guys that are all right, you can come in, I think you can be this depth player and blah, blah, blah. Can you offer me some ceiling? And I feel like despite being 23 years old, I think Luke McCaffrey has plenty of room for that.
So what were your formal day 3 grades? I think that's the only thing we didn't get.
Did I not do that? Okay. So formal day 3 grades, Jamari, these are 18 wide receiver, 18 for me, Jamari Thrash, 19, Luke McCaffrey out of Rice, 20, Brendan Rice out of USC, 21, Jalen McMillan, Washington, 22, Devontae Walker, UNC, 23, Cornelius Johnson out of Michigan, 24, Johnny Wilson, Florida State.
And just to tie mine up one more time, Tez Walker, Brendan Rice, Troy Franklin, Javon Baker were my 4s, Cornelius Johnson, Jacob Cowing, Jamari Thrash, Jordan Whittington, my 5s. There you go. 24 wide receivers apiece. A lot of overlap with the day 1. 4 out of 5. I think we had a piece.
Yeah.
With Leggete, Odunze, Nabers, and Harrison. A lot of overlap on day 2 and some good overlap on day 3, but also a couple of players that will be nice highlights for Battle of the Boards as we reflect on each other's individual rankings and how we stack these guys up and the discrepancies and the why, which I think the long form, week-long Battle of the Boards that we're going to be doing here on Locked On NFL Scouting is off to a good start, Joe.
Interior defensive line tomorrow, sir.
That's right. Got that to look forward to. I'm Kyle Crabbs. He is Joe Marino. We are Locked On NFL Scouting, getting you ready for the 2024 NFL Draft. Appreciate you guys checking out the show. Make it a great rest of your day. We're out of here.